Hello and welcome to the Art Class Curator podcast. I am Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator and the Curated Connections Library. We're here to talk about teaching art with purpose and inspiration, from the daily delights of creativity to the messy mishaps that come with being a teacher. Whether you're driving home from school or cleaning up your classroom for the 15th time today, take a second, take a deep breath, relax those shoulders, and let's get started. Hello, everybody. This is Cindy Ingram, and welcome back to the Art Class Curator podcast. I have recently, rebooted the podcast, and we have gotten some awesome feedback about the new format, and especially that first episode of Perfection Equals Failure. So I'm glad that hit a chord with some of you. That really helped get you out of your head a little bit and stop putting so much pressure on yourself. So today I had to practice what I preached because my microphone stopped working. And so I was like, well, I have this other headset, it's not as good. It picks up my breathing. It's going to pick up background noise. I was like, oh, and so instead of not doing it because I didn't have my good mic working, I am just going to record it on this device and listen to my own advice there. So what I wanted to talk about today is something that came to my mind when I was listening to a book on tape. Well, I caught myself saying it. My husband always makes fun of me for calling them books on tape because they're not called books on tape anymore. They're audiobooks, but I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. They're books on tape. So anyway, I was listening to an audiobook, Brene Brown's what was it called? Rising Strong is a Spiritual Practice. So I actually haven't read Rising Strong yet, but I was reading Rising Strong as a Spiritual Practice. And it was basically not really a book. It was a recording of a speech she did in Denver. And it was like 3 or 4 hours. So it was a longer thing, but it was really quite good. Anything she does is good, of course. But one of the things that she was talking about was curiosity. And she was specifically talking about curiosity around emotions and how, there are like 30 different emotions that humans have, but that most people, they did some studies, that most people are only aware of 3 of their emotions, but really to be an emotionally literate person, you need actually 30. And what she said in relationship to this was that I don't know the exact quote because I already returned the book back to the library, but it was, you can't be curious without knowledge, without information, without knowing enough. So it's like we can't be curious about our emotions if the only emotions we know of are sad, happy, and mad. That we need to be knowledgeable in the full scope of what emotions are available before we are allowed to really be curious about it. And that got me thinking sort of about our students and about education. And then just right after that happened, I was talking with my husband, and one of the things that we really enjoy doing is marveling about things. Sort of one of the things I enjoy most in life is just looking at something and trying to figure out how it works. Like watching the Olympics, I marvel about like the project management on how they make that whole event happen, how the TV stuff happens, how the scheduling works, how they get everybody there, and where do they stay, and stuff like that. And even like science, I'll just be like looking at my hand and be like, God, that's amazing. My hand doesn't have any muscles in it, So it's like, how does my hand able to do this? And then I think about, well, it's really my brain telling my hand to do. So anyway, I marvel about all sorts of things. When I travel, I marvel. I'm always marveling. So anyway, my husband likes to marvel as well, and he was saying the other day, he was like, it's really amazing that we breathe in oxygen, something so reactive, and that we just breathe it in. And I was like, I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was like, I can't marvel about that. I was like, I really don't know enough about oxygen to be able to marvel about that. And then all of a sudden it reminded me what Brene Brown said. It's like you have to have some sort of base foundational knowledge and to be able to be curious. So I couldn't get curious enough about how oxygen I still don't know. He didn't understand that how I didn't know, but I was like, I wasn't curious about it because I just had no frame of reference for like what oxygen is. My husband's like a science nerd, loves physics and space and stuff like that, so it made complete sense to him. But to me, I was just like, I don't get it. But that's what I realize is that marveling is amazing, but I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have knowledge about whatever I'm marveling about. Like my hand, the fact that it has no muscles in it, and that your hand is completely run by the muscles in your forearm, and then your muscles isn't run by your brain. Like if I didn't know that information, I wouldn't be able to marvel at it. So I think that it really made me think about teaching, and it made me think about providing things and teaching like vocabulary, like the elements of principles and like the basics of art history, that if we don't teach our students that, then they're not going to be curious about the art that they're seeing. If we don't teach them how to be curious and then teach them the information they need in order to be curious, that they're not going to become curious. So to me, curiosity and wonder about the world is just one of the greatest things there is. Like I live my life enjoying being curious about everything. And so another thing that kind of fits with this, though, is that one of the greatest problems I feel that we have as a culture with this new technology of cell phones in our hands and the smartphones is that we have all the answers. We have so many answers. Like I can get an answer for anything that I want. And it's amazing because I can be curious about something, immediately look it up and find the answer. But that in turn has made us really uncomfortable with uncertainty, uncomfortable with not knowing the answer. So I think that it's sort of this weird balance that we have to strike. But now that I know, and that Brene Brown has brought up this, you need information to be curious, it makes me not as worried about that because I can be curious about something. I can Google it and I can get an answer. But then that is only going to feed my curiosity. It's not going to kill my curiosity. It's going to open me up for more things to be curious about. So if I were to look up something about how bodies use oxygen, I would have that basis of information. So then I would know, so then I could be curious about more, and then it would lead to more and more questions. So it made me feel a little bit better about our culture's sort of inability to deal with uncertainty. Um, I do feel like, though, curiosity is an uncertain place. So uh, I think, you're uncertain. It leads to some certainty, but then that leads to even more uncertainty. So I was trying to find the quote, the Brene Brown quote, from that book I read or listened to. And I didn't find the quote that she was talking about, but I did find this other one from the book Rising Strong, and it says, "Choosing to be curious is choosing to be vulnerable because it requires us to surrender to uncertainty," which I think is really cool. And I think that I love that. So it got me thinking too about how else we can foster curiosity in our students and in our classrooms. And it's interesting. It made me think too about that phrase, curiosity killed the cat. Like that in some ways, we as a culture, I think, learn to stuff down curiosity. You're asking too many questions, this and that it's actually a really amazing thing to be curious because that's where problems are solved. That's where things like smartphones were invented because someone had the inkling to be curious about something, like what if we could do this or that. So I made a list of some things that I thought of ways to foster curiosity in our students. And the number one thing, and not the number one thing, I think they're all equal, or I didn't rank them in any way. But the first thing I thought of is this lesson from Brene Brown, which is to teach them things. So teach them the vocabulary to use when looking at art. Teach them how artists create meaning. Teach them a little bit about art history that makes them want to know more. And I think also giving them that vocabulary will allow them to more deeply understand and then have the ability to be curious about the art. related to teaching them things, I also think we only want to give like a little bit of information at a time so we can spark their interest. So, for an example, like if you're looking at Frida Kahlo's Two Fridas, and the student notice, or like we're just looking at really any Frida painting, but the student might notice that she looks like she's in pain. And you say, well, actually, Frida was in an accident when she was younger. And then you can ask, well, how do you think that shows in her art? So that the students learning that little bit of about her being an accident makes them curious to know more, makes them curious about how she might have felt, makes them look for that in the artwork, and then connects to it in a more deeper way. So giving little tidbits of information, but now not all of the information, will allow students to sort of try to fill in the gaps. Our brains don't like um, uncertainty. They don't like missing pieces. So we're always going to be trying to fill in the gaps with things. And that reminds me of something. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. We were talking about my experiences at this co-working space that I recently went to. And at the co-working space, there was a woman who was making sales calls. And it was making me a little bit anxious. I thought it was because I was listening to sales calls, and I find sales calls to be super uncomfortable. And the idea of receiving sales calls or giving sales calls, like that does not sound fun to me. So I think that was part of it. But then I was talking about that with someone at a meeting I was at last week, and they said that they've actually done research that says that people listening to one half of someone's phone conversation is actually really stressful because you're not hearing the other side of the conversation. And so your brain has to work really hard to try to figure out the other half of the conversation because we don't like that sort of open loop like that. Our brain is constantly trying to fill it in. And even think about like blinking. Our brain can handle like the complete visual, like taking off your visual input for just a second all the time because of that blinking. And that, if you were to read a sentence and leave out a word in the sentence or something like that, like our brains would be able to fill that in, because our brains are just coded that way. We're putting the world together. We are piecing it together in all sorts of different ways. So we're looking for the answers. So I think giving them little puzzles to solve, little bits of information, will allow that brain activity to work. I think another way to spark curiosity is twofold in that it's related to you. So it's modeling curiosity and then also your attitude towards the learning activity. So if you come in, and I say this all the time in my lessons on how to teach art, how to lead art discussions, stuff like that, but that your attitude coming in and towards a topic makes a big difference in the learning of the student. So if you come in excited about the topic, you come in modeling curiosity yourself, the student is going to be more interested in what you're teaching about. One example of this is I went to the University of Texas at Austin for college. I got my bachelor's in art history. So I have two art history professors. Well, I had many, but there are two that I'm thinking of. One of them made me extremely excited about the topic that he was teaching. Professor Waldman at UT Austin is still there. I haven't seen him since I was in college, so it was probably, I don't know, gosh, that'll be 20 years since I've seen him, but he was so enthusiastic about his topic. He would get up on the table and wave his arms around, and he was just so passionate about what he was teaching. And it was Italian Renaissance was his specialty. And so I got really excited about the Italian Renaissance. I found it to be fascinating because of his teaching style. He could make it really exciting. Now, there was another teacher who was teaching about ancient Rome. And the class, I actually dropped the class, I think, within like a week or two, like before the drop deadline or whatever, because there was not that excitement there. He was walking through, showing us videos of him walking through Pompeii, which honestly at the time, this was like pre-YouTube. I don't know when YouTube started, but it was early YouTube at least. But like we didn't have the internet like we have it now. So seeing videos of it, I think looking back probably was kind of cool. But it was just him talking on the video, and there was not the excitement. It was just like disconnected for me. And so I was like, I don't want to have to deal with this whole semester. I'm going to take something more exciting. Um, so, our attitude coming into a lesson plays a big role in whether our students find it as interesting as we do. When you're teaching something that you find boring, that is very likely that the students are also going to find it boring. So when you're coming up with your lessons, one, you want to pick things that are interesting, but also you want to um, find what it is that there is to be curious about in that topic, and then and interject that into your lesson. So modeling curiosity is really important. We aren't born knowing everything, but we are born curious. That's how we learn. If you think about it, like as a baby, they're looking at the world and they're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Uh, and they're using that curiosity to learn, and they're using that curiosity, to their advantage. And then you want to create novelty. So, you have, when it comes to teaching art appreciation and connecting your students with art, you have the best topic. You have unlimited number of artworks. Like we could talk about a new artwork every day the rest of our lives and never run out of content. I need to do this. I would be interested in doing the stats on that, like every minute, probably at least every hour. The rest of my life, I would never run out of content. So you have the world of art at your fingertips. So it's really important to pick artworks that are really going to grab the students, because that novelty, that interest, that intrigue is going to make them more curious. So I teach about in the Art Appreciation Masterclass, which is in the Curated Connections Library, I teach about the 4 C's of picking an artwork. You want something that's captivating, that instantly makes them curious. So, they immediately are like, what's going on here? This is interesting. There's this different, their brain just starts to go. You want something then that is complex and that is, what's the third one? Communicative, to tell stories, but that captivating one, and then also that connect. The 4th C is connected, that there is a way into some sort of personal connection. So that is also going to stimulate curiosity as well when it's something that they can relate to. And then also, you want to be delighted when your students are curious. So if your students ask a really interesting question, or they make an observation that sparks curiosity in you or in the rest of the class, delight in that. Notice that, acknowledge that. I wouldn't say reward that, but they're getting that reward through your delight and um, through just the general vibe that it creates in the class. That is a reward for the student. So make sure that you tell the students that, when they've really sparked your curiosity. Uh, Not only in art discussions, but also in, with their art making and the other stuff that you're doing in your classroom. That if you're noticing that a particular student is extra curious, reward that, acknowledge that. And then we also want to teach students to ask questions. So we can put artworks up on the screen and we can, ask our open-ended questions and we can have them make their observations. But I think another way in to exploring art is to teach students to ask their own questions, because later on in their lives, when they're confronted with a work of art, they're going to know the types of things to look for. So they're going to have the knowledge base of what to look for. And then they can ask themselves questions like, what was this artist thinking? Why did this artist do that? And then asking those questions is going to help them, be more curious about the world. So in a nutshell, curiosity and wonder are amazing ways to be human in this world. They're amazing ways to get meaning from the world, to explore the world, and to add sort of an excitement and an energy into the world. And by showing students works of art, you're helping fuel that curiosity that gets kind of beaten out of them in some of the way our education system is run, because curiosity did not kill the cat. Curiosity kept the cat alive more than it killed the cat. Like curiosity is one of the best things that about humanity. And even, I mean, I would say that there probably has been signs of curiosity in animals too. But anyway, that's a whole other research. And now I'm curious about that. Want to do a little research because I have enough information about what my dog's ears do when he hears a noise that shows me that he is curious, but that gives me enough information to do some more research. So that is my podcast episode today. Think about ways that you can make your students more curious and that you yourself can become more curious. Let us know in the comments of this post at artclasscurator.com/32. What are some of your favorite ways to explore curiosity in your classroom? Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Art Class Curator podcast. Help more art teachers find us by reviewing the podcast and recommending it to a friend. Get more inspiration for teaching art with purpose by subscribing to our newsletter, Your Weekly Art Break. Recent topics include the importance of seeing art in person, famous and should-be famous women artists, and 21 days of art from around the world. Subscribe at artclasscurator.com/artbreak to receive 6 free art appreciation worksheets. Today's art quote is from Socrates, and he says, "The only thing I know is that I know nothing." Thanks so much for listening. Have a wonderful week.